Hey guys, today we are with Shabir Kabiri, West Point class of 2016. Shabir's had a very interesting background, grew up in Afghanistan. He was actually an Afghan exchange cadet at West Point. And in the recent events of Afghanistan, he was evacuated with his family a few months ago. And today I wanted to give him the opportunity to share a story, starting from when he grew up in Afghanistan, went to West Point, and life after that. So Shabir, tell us, what was it like growing up in Afghanistan, and how did you come to get accepted and finally attend West Point?
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for the opportunity. So yeah, I grew up in Kabul. I went to high school there, and my granddad was in the army. He was an NCO back in old Afghanistan. So it was always something curious for me. And when I was in high school, I learned about the National Military Academy of Afghanistan, NEMA, and I applied for there. I got accepted to NEMA. I went there, studied for a year and a half. What happened at NEMA, the Afghan Academy, West Point had advisors there to train the officers there and help with the curriculum. And they offered a scholarship for West Point, which I applied. And then I got into West Point in 2012 and came to States.
So you went first to the military academy in Afghanistan for what, about a year and a half, right?
Correct, a year and a half, and where I did and I studied the English and maths to prepare for West Point, and along with the other Afghan curriculum and military training and physical and academic.
So what was it like? Let's go back to your childhood. What was it like growing up in Afghanistan during that time frame?
It was interesting. I mean, in terms of, so you haven't seen the outer world. It's always you're curious at what's happening in other countries. All your information comes from the movies. So it's always, I guess, a nagging desire that you want to see what is beyond my country's borders. And also you do feel that something is lacking with education. So we did go to schools, but our schools were very, basic, and the books are not up to date. So it was always this desire that there's probably something more and I need to get to that. And that, I think that desire, that idea, that wanting to some more led me to the academy and eventually to the state and moving in the other programs that I did later on.
So I guess it was a kind of a big culture shock. It is for, any American. I know when I went to West Point, it was a culture shock. But what was the culture shock like for you when you went from Afghanistan to the US and to West Point?
It was right. Like you could say like double or triple culture shock. So because one, it was coming to a different, first time I left my country, first time going abroad and coming to the States, one culture shock. Then the coming to West Point, its own culture and its own different set of values. It was a lot. It was a lot to take, but I was truly amazed. One thing that stood out for me was the respect, was how everybody wanted to help you, especially at West Point, where if somebody is lacking, how everybody comes forward to assess you, your chain of command, your both in cadets and the officers and NCOs. It was a lot, but I had good company and many people to help me with it.
So you found it to be quite helpful and supportive of the culture at West Point, right?
It was, and that was something that very much, one of the things that stood out for me, and I was amazed by it. And I really took that to myself, that it's how important it is to respect and to kind of empathy. I think one of the values that I guess I developed at West Point was the empathy. And I think since then, after West Point and working in the industry for 2 years, then grad school, then again working for the World Bank recently, which we could discuss later, I've really used how empathy has been helpful for me as to grow professionally and to work with teams and build trust.
So you talked about the positive surprise at West Point. There must have been some of the things that kind of shocked you. What were some of those?
Right. It was, I guess it was tough for me because I think West Point is tough pretty much for everyone. But and for me, as I pointed earlier, when we went to school in Afghanistan, our education system lacked a lot. So we weren't, I guess we could say the basics were not covered as much. So when I came to West Point, and I had to work really hard on maths, on the other subjects to kind of fill all those gaps that I had built up all these years. At West Point, you're expected to write essays, and sometimes quite very long essays that everybody struggles with. And I had to struggle with them a lot because we didn't write as much essays. I think that took a high toll on me, but in that I always hated it, like why this so much. But when I graduated it, and when I reflect back now, I see that how much it helped me and how much it was worth it for me.
So writing essays, that's interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Well, it is. I mean, it was a second language, so I can see the difficulty. What about, there's a lot of engineering and math at West Point. What about those topics?
Those, I think, which might be usual, I guess, since math is an international, as a language by itself recognized by everybody. So those were easier to understand, to follow up. But yeah, as you said, writing essays, because I started by having a dictionary right next to me, and I would do my readings, and the readings would be long, and I have to pause every paragraph to look for a word. And this is how I learned English, honestly, but with the dictionary next to me. And all right, what is this word? How it's pronounced and what does it mean? And if I couldn't find the meaning, I wouldn't understand what that whole paragraph was about. And this was with the history, with the biology, with psychology, with all these classes. That was tough part and during the first 2 years at West Point. But the third and fourth year, when that was covered, so it was easier. But science was easier than literature, I would say.
Okay. That's actually quite interesting. So, you graduated 2016. You actually graduated with another Afghan cadet. What was your life like the last 5 years? What have you been up to?
Right, very unexpected. At West Point, it's so much organized, as right? I will graduate and go back and serve in the army. But actually, what happened for me when in 2016 I graduated and went back to Afghanistan due to some technical or management issues, I couldn't get into commission in the Afghan army. I found myself in a position because when you're, I guess, in the army and at West Point, your career is set up. And that touches on the transition also for the army to civilian life. And I found myself like right there instantly, like, okay, I need to figure out a new career. How does it work? I didn't even have a resume at that point. I graduated and I had to start from scratch. But I worked, and I think all those values, all those skills that I developed at West Point helped a lot. I applied for a job at the industry. I worked for the telecommunications. So I did electrical engineering at West Point. So I had worked for a telecom company in Afghanistan for 2 years, then applied for a scholarship through the U.S. Embassy Fulbright scholarship. I got that scholarship. I came to States again from 2018 to 2020, did my grad school in electrical engineering, then went back to Afghanistan and there started working for the World Bank until August. And then events happened in August, came back. But it was very unusual for me. I hadn't planned this, but I think it worked well eventually.
Wow, you had a whirlwind experience. You get back to Afghanistan after West Point. It didn't work out to join the Afghan army. You worked, then you went to grad school, came back to Afghanistan, worked again, this time for the World Bank, right?
Correct.
And what was that like working for the World Bank?
The World Bank, it was very good. Because, when I graduated in 2016, went back, didn't work out to join the army, it always felt that something is missing. I have to contribute. During that time, I would go to the U.S. Embassy meetings, and these were meetings with the military attaché office. My point is I kept contact. I did a year and a half of the Afghan Academy, so I had classmates in the Afghan army who were officers now. So I still try to see them and try to share knowledge and things that I had learned at West Point. I kept it communicating and engaging with the Afghan army officers, classmates, and the U.S. military which were there, such as I had visits at the Resolute Support HQ, where the coalition and American forces were there. Yeah, so that was going on during my first time, 2016 to 2018. And also in 2020, when I graduated in grad school, went back, I kept doing that also. But obviously, I started working for the World Bank. And again, it was very good to give back because at the World Bank, I was working on a national digital development infrastructure project where we were trying to build the national fiber backbone of the country, get the internet accessible to not only the cities, to the rural areas, launch programs and trainings to teach IT skills to the youth and to the families so they get online, make government services more online. Because in the state, I think sometimes you may get these things, get them like it's just they're out there. You know how much crucial they are, that with your phone you can get appointment with the DMV, you can set up all your appointments, you access so much state or government services online. We were trying to do all these things in Afghanistan through the World Bank effort, and it was very good for the 1 year that I worked with them and tried to contribute to that also.
Well, it sounds like it was a very fulfilling work when you did that. Well, right now you're in Maryland, you're in the US with your family. Tell us a little bit about the last couple of months and that led to the government changes in Afghanistan. What happened right before? How did you and your family get out? And then what happened right after that, after you were evacuated?
I think as probably most of our audience, this interview follows that the events that happened in August in Afghanistan, very dramatic. It is a very interesting story because that day when the government fell, August 15, I was sitting behind my computer. I was still doing World Bank work. And I get a call from my West Point classmates, hey, you need to get to the airport and for the evacuation. And that was like so much uncertain, like, whoa, what's going on? How would that work? But they coordinated it, and we know how that evacuation went on for next 2 weeks during August, but I was able to leave the country within the first few days. What happened then, we evacuated Kabul, got stateside, and I was at Fort Bliss, Texas for a while, waiting for my processing. And eventually we got processed out, came to Maryland where we are resettling right now. A lot of things happened, but in a nutshell, this was the story. And everybody, I think it's out there, knows that how the veteran community worked really, really hard. Not only the veterans community, at one point you saw, and this was a very amazing and remarkable, and I hope this would always be remembered and documented. You had the veteran community, you had the folks at the Hill, senators, congressmen, congresswomen, you had everybody gripping hands together and making this evacuation, getting as many people as they could. And it was truly remarkable for me to see it firsthand, how it happened.
It sounds like you had a lot of help, and thankfully there was a lot of people that were able to help you and your family. It sounds like it was all very sudden. It was the day. And so on the 15th, you said it was the 15th of August, you found out that you probably would have to go. And when was the evacuation? When did you actually leave the country?
17. Even though I was in the first days of evacuation, the chaos of the evacuation started from the first night, from the first plane that came to evacuate. So even though on 15, I went to the airport and tried to get evacuated, I couldn't. 2 days. We were out there trying to reach the American lines. So what happened, because of so much uncertainty surrounding the airport, and given that the Kabul, there was no government, on the afternoon of August 15, there was no accountability in the city. Nobody knows what's going on. And the Taliban were coming in, and it was a total chaos. So what happened, the Marines who landed at the Kaya with Hamid Karzai International Airport at the time, they set up a perimeter. And if we talk military, the objective was to contact the American line and enter. Because if you're outside the line, you are unsafe. You are in the chaos. It's risky, very dangerous. And we spent 2 days to make that contact. And eventually on the morning of 17, working with so many people, real time, everybody is on their WhatsApp, which a lot of people probably, if they were engaged in this effort, saw how everybody was on WhatsApp or other means signal to make this effort happen. But yeah, it happened after 2 days, eventually on August 17.
Yeah, so the 15th to the 17th, you were outside the airport? Is that what you're saying?
Sometime inside the airport, sometime we would get pushed back by the crowd. And also when the Taliban at some point entered the airport, it was just this chaos and back and forth and trying to be safe at the same time from the crowd and also from other threats. Because I was evacuating, so I had to carry a lot of my documents with me, such as and there's another story with how the West Point ring helped me to get in, and the West Point diploma and other documents with me. And so there's always that risk of not getting caught. At one point, they pushed people out of the airport, so I had to go to the checkpoint. And somehow I managed to pass the checking, and I made sure that my bag because my bag was filled with documents relating to West Point, to other efforts that I had done. But yeah, it was dangerous, uncertain, but luckily we were safe and things worked out.
Well, yeah, sounds like a lot happened in those 2 days. Tell me about the West Point ring. How did that help you as you were doing the
Correct. As I explained, the events And during this time, it's I hope you could talk to Nakib also. He's the Afghan graduate class of 2017. It's so we were. It's interesting. We were friends. We know each other from the Afghan Academy before 2012. Before coming to West Point, we were in the same class. Then we came to West Point. I came 1 year before him. So during this evacuation, August 15 to 17, we were together with our families, both trying to evacuate, both in touch with the same classmates who were helping us. We were unsuccessful to enter the American line within the first 2 days. In the morning of August 17, we decided, all right, let's put our West Point rings so we could be identified with that. And we put on our rings, took a picture of that, took a picture of ourselves, and sent it to a POC. I would like to mention his name, but for his security and privacy, I would not. But it was an Army officer, and he came in to pick us up. If he hadn't come, if we couldn't have made contact with him, I don't know if we would have been able to make contact in the next days or not. I don't know what would have happened. But that helped because you had the thousands of crowd in a very limited location. And this POC was on the other side of the fence and the other side of the canal. And we had to make sure I contact him. And there's also another side of it. I mean, for me, I was in third grade at West Point, and this was our symbol on the wolf pack. And so everybody was trying to wave. And he was also cautious of this, because if he waved at someone, 100 people would wave at him and he wouldn't see me. So I made this sign. I thought, I don't think other Afghans would make this sign. And with this sign, he saw me. And then he said, he made an eye contact, I got you. Then he waved to other people to make sure that kind of make it discreet that he saw me. But yeah, these things happened on that morning, and then we entered the line, and on the same day we boarded one of the C-17s and left the country.
Sounds like it was a pretty difficult journey just to even get to the airport, right?
Yes. It was very difficult. It was very uncertain. You never knew where the checkpoint would be. And both Nakib and I had a lot of identifying documents, and we needed those documents to get into the airport and wet ourselves, because both the Marines and both the 82nd who were there, it was so hard for them to wet people because you had thousands of people trying to get in.
So then you get inside the gate, you get into the line to get into the C-17s. I saw those lines. What was the feeling when you finally get into the C-17 and it takes off? How did you feel?
Honestly, the very second that we crossed the line, there was a fence gate and the Marines were holding it, because the crowd was pushing. There was constant push by the crowd to get in. And it was truly a security posture to make sure that you have a gate so you let people and let it go. The second that we crossed, it felt different, because on this side, you had the total chaos and uncertainty and dangerous. At any time, I was not only concerned of my safety, but also my family. So I was thinking, should I leave because it was very dangerous to just be there. But at one time when we were there, both Nakib and I with our families, they were shooting right by our feet, because there were some Afghan soldiers still working with the Americans to make with the evacuation effort. So they had to disperse people, and out of necessity, they had to shoot. But yeah, when we crossed that line, it was totally like the feeling, all right, we are in safety now. And I assured my family, because it was very shocking. I mean, I had the military training, so it was, I guess, easy for me and Nakib. But then our families, that was totally different, because they're all civilians. They haven't seen this side of the world. But then it felt very safe, and after that we just followed the process. And then I told them it's certainty now. We crossed the line of uncertainty to certainty.
Wow, what a story. So then you get inside the gate behind the Marines. You're at the airport. How long before you were actually on the plane and taking off?
It was not long. So this was the third day of evacuation, still the initial phase of evacuation. So it was within 2 to 3 hours we left the airport. But I know later on in the evacuation process, in the end of the second week, sometimes people had to wait a day or two then within the American line at the airport, which was very challenging. But this didn't happen for us in this case.
So you took off, you said within 2-3 hours. Where did you guys fly to initially?
Initially, that flight landed to Qatar, to the Air Force Base. I can't recall the name of the base. In Qatar, we spent there another 2 days to get verified, to get checked in by the state and the embassy folks that are out there, and then boarded a charter plane to a state, and we landed in Washington, D.C., Dulles Airport. There, again, went through the checking of Customs and Borders, and then flew to Fort Bliss, Texas. It's part of the evacuation effort, because The Afghan evacuees had to be relocated to one of the army installations. We spent about 2 months at Fort Bliss to make sure do the medical checkups, get the shots, other stuff, other paperwork until we were released to our state, Maryland, where we are resettling. So
You spent a couple of months in Fort Bliss, Texas, and now you're in Maryland, and you have a new job you're starting, right? Tell me about that.
correct. I got a new job, which I'm starting this Monday. This is with Altec Industries. They're based in Birmingham, Alabama, the manufacturer of trucks and cranes that go to utility and telecom companies. And again, I found out through this process how everybody has been really helpful. As you know, getting a job process, especially for people who are transitioning, can be very daunting. You don't have experience to talk to employers in all the negotiation phase. But this employer, they were so supportive and helpful and understanding of my situation. They took it easy and gave me some time to take all the steps with time. But it worked out. I've signed an offer with them, and I'm going to be starting soon with them.
It's fantastic. What a story. You came from Afghanistan, you did the in-processing at Fort Bliss, and now you're starting a new job. I know we did some coaching a little bit with CareerNerds. How did the process help you, and how do you think it can help you into the future?
It was very helpful. I truly appreciate the networking. I believe it's very essential and very helpful, but it's always that idea, how do you do it? What is the right way to do it? And thank you so much for offering the coaching sessions for both for me and Nakib. We found it very useful because I know we work on our LinkedIn, and when I go back see in my LinkedIn, I think I really like it myself and I understand they're so essential. I mean, it's just as easy as having these bullet points and do some formatting and be conscious of what you're putting out there. But once you do that, it just represents you so well, instead of just writing vaguely. And it's overall, it's very helpful, very positive.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, in our careers, our first job is just the first step in a whole career. And as your first job in the US, this is going to probably lead to many, many other jobs. What do you think is going to be probably the challenges you're going to look for other jobs later on in your career?
I think the challenge would be so you have this skill set, let's say you have the knowledge base. How do you translate it to match your current reality? How do you make sure the employee understands your skills are used? And there might be some cultural differences for me because I've never worked in stateside. And the challenge would be how to overcome this, I guess, a lack of communication, maybe, to make sure that you're on the same page, you're understood correctly, and what skills that you have is, because sometimes I mentioned the lack of communication, because you might not be able to convey that this is the skill set that I have, and this is how I could be helpful with these opportunities. And also try to find out for yourself what job suits me well. I think that is important too. But I maybe at this point, I am not even aware of what challenges are out there, but I do understand that doing networking and talking to people, and I do find talking to mentors very, very helpful, because I'm still at a very early stage of my career. And I do know that if I talk to a mentor, the advice that they give me is probably the best advice for me. Because if I go on, take that decision, I'm not sure that this decision would be correct. But if I verify it with one or two mentors, who, in our case, if you're grads, sometimes we have the generals, retired generals, or other people in academia. So they have these years of experience. And with networking, with keeping in touch with them, we could use their years of experience. We don't have to figure out by ourselves. So I found that helpful, and I hope I'm really planning to use that later on.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I think networking with peers, with mentors, even with coaches, to really expand your knowledge set so you don't have to make the same mistakes and you really gain from the knowledge of others, is a really valuable skill set. So since you have such an intimate understanding of what happened in Afghanistan recently, and you still have family there, is there anything you'd like to share with people about your thoughts about the whole situation and what hope you have for the country?
It is a very tough discussion. What happens, it really requires you to have pretty much expertise in international relations to understand the situation there. It is a regional conflict. It is not just limited to Afghanistan. You have if you think you have two nuclear powered, a nuclear powered neighbor, Pakistan, then India, then the China, Russia, all these global and regional hegemons. It's very hard discussion, and very unfortunate how the transition happened, how the forces left, and it led to a total collapse. Because during the past 20 years, people worked really hard, and with working for the World Bank last year, I truly saw how we were out there making these very basic services and infrastructure that could have helped country for many, many years to come. But overnight, all these developments and work went for nothing. And not to mention the risk and the risk that it has put people who are still facing risk that are out there, and all the past conflicts that has happened there, people are losing their lives. But you have to be hopeful all the time. So what I'm trying to say that in the past 20 years, a large population of Afghans, especially the youth, got to study abroad, got to know the world, build new values. And yes, some of the youth like myself and my friends who left the country, who are outside now, but I think we have a piece of ourselves in Afghanistan. We are always committed to serve back. And even with the World Bank, I'm planning to still engage as a part-time work as a consultant, and making sure that try to find a solution way forward. And it's just about helping the people, about helping the population with education, with other services. So we have to remain hopeful, and we'll see how it goes.
Well, Shabir, I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for taking a few minutes with us here to share your story with the followers that we have on Career Nerds. And I'm glad your family and you are safe, and that you're ready to start your new career here in the US. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom, and thanks so much for this. And I also just want to thank everybody, not my classmates who helped me in Akib, but also the whole veteran community who really, in a very short period, it's truly amazing. And I want to emphasize that again. This has to be documented, how this events unfolded and how they worked hard to get people out to safety. And I want to thank everyone who was part of that effort and helped in any way they could. Thank you.
Absolutely. It sounds like that you got a lot of help, and there's a lot to be thankful for.
Yeah.
Thanks, Shabir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.